All right, everyone, welcome to session 3. Technically, it's week 4. We went a little out of order, but if you're watching these videos, this is the 3rd session that you're going to want to be paying attention to. The first week, we went over talking about, I'm sorry, what did we talk about? We talked about your money personalities, knowing thyself a little bit, what it is that you need to know about your behaviors and understanding your buying, potentials, different things like that. And what we did the next week was objectives. So that is starting with the end in mind. Where are we trying to go in 3 to 5 years? What are those goals? You only get 3 objectives. That is one of the most important sessions you could watch throughout this entire course that we have, because if you don't know what your objectives are, you don't know what the end is, including the time frame and different things like that, you'll never be able to map out where you're going with it. You have to have think of it like a road trip. If you start driving somewhere and you get the map out, you bust out the GPS, what's the first thing you do? You got to punch in where it is you're going, right? So in life, it seems silly and it seems super obvious, but a lot of times people don't know exactly where they're going. More often than not, what ends up happening is people actually know, okay, I'm driving from Florida, I'm in Florida, but I'm driving to Tennessee. Okay, so we have a general direction of what we got to go, but where in Tennessee? There's a lot of places in Tennessee we could go. Well, that's kind of what ends up happening is people think that's a good enough goal. Well, I'm just going from here to Tennessee. Well, the problem with that is that there's a lot of different ways to get to Tennessee from here. And it's vastly different between being stuck in the mountains versus heading over to, Nashville, So the more specific we can get, I'm going to Nashville and I'm staying at, this hotel, the better we can map out exactly where it is we're going. And in life, a lot of people don't do that. In life, a lot of people, they just kind of say, yeah, I'm heading to Tennessee. And sometimes people don't even have that. They just go, I'm going north. So that's what session 2 was all about. So here with session 3, we are going to be talking about evaluation a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you now. We're going to come over here, blow this up. All right. So great. All right, so here we are with evaluation, finding the starting point of your journey. Now, this may seem a little obvious, and a lot of people go like, the starting point of my journey, okay, well, that's here, like it's where I am now. And that's true, but the reality is the majority of people, when they begin a journey, they don't really take a proper account into where it is that or where it is that they're starting off with. A lot of times they may know I'm starting off here, but the bigger question is, what are you starting off with? What resources do you have for this journey? So a lot of times people go, well, yeah, I got a house and we're making some money and we're doing this and, we're going to try to go do X objective. Well, how much money do you actually have? Studies show that only about 1 in 4 Americans have a budget that they follow pretty, on a monthly basis. So if you aren't really keeping track of stuff, a lot of times people tend to underestimate their expenses and they tend to overestimate their income or what they have. So it's very important that we pinpoint, just like our destination, we have to pinpoint where it is we are starting off and what it is that we are going with. So it's like that old video game, the Oregon Trail, that they used to have kind of going off. We had the wagon, had the donkeys pulling it. What's actually in the wagon? What resources do we have? That's what the starting point is about, because when we know that, then we know what are our gaps, what are some of the things that we need to either go and acquire or repurpose for the trip, and we can really get ready to do a proper strategy from there. So let's get into it a little bit. So kind of what I was alluding to, we like to work backwards a lot in this process. So that's why we start with the end in mind. So now we know where we want to go. We've built out our objectives. We have 3 to 5 goals picked out. So like I said, review your objectives and the anticipated time frame. Remember, the time frame is super important. You want to put a 20% down payment on a house that is $400,000 and you want to do it in 3 years. Okay, lock in those dates. If you want to go and you want to hike The Appalachian Trail, okay, that's fine. If you're not a hiker, guess what? You're going to get blisters on your feet. You got to get the right shoes. You got to do all these other things. What you need a training plan. So now that we know you want to hike the Appalachian Trail, and let's say you want to do it within 4 years, well, now you know that you have 48 months to properly prepare yourself, get in the proper shape, get the right camping materials, all the other things that you'll need to do. So this is why we start with the end in mind and we work our way backwards. The next thing that you want to do is you want to reflect on the deep meaning tied to it. So a lot of times we don't think about the deep meaning when it comes to things. So a very common one I talk about a lot is buying a house. Well, I want to buy a house. Okay, well, why are you buying the house? What is it about the house? Is the house an investment? Are you going to fix it up and turn around and flip it? Are you buying a new house because you need to have an in-law move in with you because they've recently fallen ill? So it's not so much about the house as it is having your family all under one roof and being able to provide care for them. Is it like me? I just recently built a house and me and my wife had a perfectly good house. But the reason that we did it was, one, we saw an opportunity to where with me starting my own company, I needed space for an office. And a lot of people who are working from home now in the pandemic have this. I needed dedicated space for an office that was separate from the house. So noise and all this other stuff wouldn't mess us up. Because if I didn't do that, then I was going to have to go rent office space. And there was nothing in the area of where we were currently living. And that would have meant I wouldn't have been able to pick up the kids from school, and I wouldn't be able to do drop-offs as much, and it would limit what I could do during the day, and yada, yada, yada. So even though the goal was buying a home in all three of those scenarios, the deep meaning tied to it really didn't have that much to do with a home. It either had to do with an investment in making money, income in the first situation. Second situation, it was taking care of family. And the third situation is, living the lifestyle that we want and enabling me to spend more time with family and get work done at home. So a lot of different reasons to do the same thing. That's why the deep meaning is important, because when things get hard, we're not going to focus on the fact that, I want to buy this house. We're going to focus on whatever that deep meaning is. The last one is, envision what life will feel like when you have achieved them. It's really important. They talk about this in psychological studies all the time. The more you can envision what something is going to be like, the closer it feels. So even if it's, hey, you're still 2 years off from reaching your objective, if you can envision, oh man, I'm going to take my wife to Hawaii and we are going to, chill out on the beach and, have a coconut drink in my hand and all that. The more you can envision that, the more real it will feel. And even though it's far away, you'll be able to do it. When people are climbing the mountain, you never focus on the peak of the mountain. You don't climb a mountain looking up at the peak the whole time. You're focused on a step by step. But every once in a while, what do? You look up at the summit and you look up at that peak and you go, that's where I'm going. And that's why we work our way backwards. All right. So kind of talked about this, but you can't map out your path until you know where you are going and where you are starting from. So that's why the objective has to happen first. You got to know where you're going, because until you know where you're going, you can't pick a direction. And if you focus on where you're starting from before you know where you're going, sometimes that can intimidate and be like, I took a good stock of my situation here. And that just doesn't feel realistic. We don't ever start at the beginning, because we can get caught in our situation, in our circumstances, and then that will inhibit us dreaming of what could be possible or what it is that we truly desire or are dreaming about. So always start with the end in mind. All right, so we're going to hang on this one. There's not a ton of slides in this today. This one's really important. If you want to take a screenshot, do it. But time to create what I call the list. No, that is not a grammatical error. The is capitalized. It's kind of like, the Facebook back in the day before they dropped the V. But the list, the reason I capitalize that, it's something I came up with. I truly believe that this is one of the most important lists that you will ever create. That's why I called it the list. So this is what you have to do to create the list. You have to write down every monthly expense. I don't care if it's a $9 a month subscription to Spotify. It's like, Steven, it's just $9 a month. You're right. It is only $9 a month. But then you have $16 a month with Netflix, then you have $8 a month with Disney Plus, and then you have it. All the subscriptions really start to add up, and a lot of them are redundant. So every single monthly expense, I don't care what it is. And guess what? Don't forget to check your phone, because there's a lot of apps on here that are, not music streaming. I have a couple productivity ones that I've bought. They're like $3.99 a month. They're totally worth it. I get a lot of use out of them, but they're still $3.99 a month, So you need to make sure that you're accounting for all of it, because when you add all these subscriptions together, you can actually come up with a pretty big bill. And that's fine. A lot of these apps are great and they're worth it, but we have to, number one, be careful that, we don't continue to subscribe to things that we don't need anymore or aren't using. Maybe we bought it for a season and now we're paying for it like a gym membership we never use. So we've got to do that. So every single monthly expense that's coming in, make sure you write that down. The next one is to be sure to have the final payoff, if it has one. If it's just a subscription, obviously there's no payoff. But if it's like a car payment, that's going to have a final payoff amount. So have the final payoff amount and the interest rates for every single monthly expense. So if you're doing an Excel spreadsheet, breaking it out, hey, have the name of it. This is, what we're paying for the car. Right here, we still owe $15,000 on it. And right over here, our interest rate is 7%. Okay, perfect. So that is something that you have to make sure you have. And we'll get into why all those details are important here in a little bit. Okay, so add a separate category for the annual expenses. So there are subscriptions out there like Amazon Prime that gets charged once a year. You forget it's there. They just took the price up again. It's still $130. You got to really evaluate if it's worth it for you or not. If you shop a lot and need that free shipping, then great. If you use the streaming service, cool. They offer a lot of stuff. You just got to make sure it's worth it. It only comes up once a year, so it's easy to forget about. Car tag. Hey, we forget about that. That only comes around once a year, sometimes once every 2 years. Because I know for me, I choose the option for every 2 years just to pay it so I don't have to deal with it. It's the same amount. So that's something to pay attention to. That can be a budget buster. If you got 2 cars, all of a sudden you get $100 bill you weren't expecting. Like we said, subscriptions, anything else you can think of that may be an annual expense that comes in. I have something that I just bought for music, unregistered licensing for music that I can use in the background on videos. Well, that's like $200 a month, or I'm sorry, $200 a year. And I have the option to pay monthly or annually. Well, I choose annually because they give me a discount. So, but that's only going to come up once a year. And I'll be like, oh shoot, that's $200. I wasn't expecting May of next year. So the best you can, try to account for as many annual expenses so they don't kind of knock you off sideways when they show up. Next one, calculate the monthly difference between expenses and income. So that is, I'm actually jumping the gun a little bit on that because part 2 is income, but that is going to be important. So you'll need to calculate the income. And a lot of times that's simpler. People have a handful of those coming in. This is really big. Do not leave out pet expenses. Pets during the pandemic, the amount of pets bought, stuff that people bought for pets skyrocketed. Why? People were stuck at home and they were lonely. So what did? They went out and they got that pet dog or cat or iguana or the, classroom goldfish or whatever it was. Well, guess what? A lot of those things cost money. Maybe not the goldfish. They only live like 7 days, I think. But a lot of these other pets, they cost money. My dog needs grooming. She's a beautiful golden doodle. But the reality is she gets really thick fur. And in the summer, we got to get her clipped. So I think we do it every 8 weeks. That's another $120 for a haircut that we got to send her to. So little things like that. Don't forget to add your pets in there, because the pets, that can definitely throw people off. They don't realize sometimes how much money they spend on them. The last one is this: include debt you may not be actively paying off, such as personal loans, hospital payments, loans that have been deferred. This came up a lot, I found, as we had a couple of situations early on in the pandemic to where the government came in and they said, hey, we are deferring student loans. You don't have to pay on them right now. So people, because they had the debt, but they didn't have to pay it off, or maybe it was a personal loan. I knew somebody who had a loan from an uncle. He didn't really give a time stamp as to when he wanted the money back. He just get it to me. So they were trying to figure out, they're like, well, I don't have to pay that off right now. They didn't put it on the list. I'm like, no. that absolutely goes on the list. So it doesn't matter whether or not you're actively paying it off. What matters is that it's there, it exists, write it down. Okay, so that should get us done with part one, which is all of our expenses. We're going to have a nice round picture of it. Like I said, if you're doing this on Excel for the first time, or if you're writing it down on paper, however you're doing it, just do your best to make sure it's listed in a nice and orderly fashion. One way that I recommend maybe sorting it a little bit, if you want, is I like to put anything that has an interest payment at the top, and I like to descend by my highest interest payment all the way to the bottom, and then things that don't have an interest payment. So you don't have to do it that way, but when we get to where we're going, it will help you from a visual perspective. Part two. So this is the more fun stuff where we calculate the money coming in. So write down all sources of income, whether monthly, quarterly, biannual, or annually. And the reason I remind people about that is because, I worked in sales for a really long time, and I had, and I also work for a publicly traded company. So I had multiple different forms of income from the same job. So I had my regular paycheck that I got every month, technically twice a month, but I got that every month. And then what ends up happening is I had, because it's a publicly traded company, employee stock purchase plan. Well, depending on the company I was working for at the time, that either came in every quarter or it came in every 6 months. So that was additional income that I wasn't counting on that was being taken in, but obviously I knew it was there. I just didn't have it in my bank account yet because of the way an ESPP works. So you've got to take that into effect. The other thing, quarterly, you might have dividends. Maybe you're invested in some stocks you've been holding on too long to, get a couple $100 a month in dividend, or a quarter, or however often the payout is. Maybe it's an annual payout. Whatever that is, that's dividend income that you've got to be paying attention to. So just try to make sure that you understand all of your sources of income. List all savings and investment account totals. So this is another one. Go to the bank account. Any savings accounts, include that total, and investment accounts, your E-Trades, TD Ameritrade, 401ks, IRAs, put all of that in the same thing. Got a pension? Great. Put all of those in there. Include any equity in small businesses or real estate. So when we talk about this, there's a lot of back and forth. And for our purposes, people are like, do you consider, we're not there yet. Do you consider this like the money that you have in your home? Let's say you have 20% down that you put in your home. Yeah, because if you sold your house tomorrow, you wouldn't have that debt anymore, but you would get that money back that was that equity. So what I tell people is, if you've got a $500,000 house, put down 20%, well, that's $100,000 that, you can't go out and just spend it. You have to either, there's ways and loans that you can do to get access to that capital, or you have to sell your home, but that's equity. That definitely counts as something. So if you got $100,000 in equity, absolutely include that. I'll even encourage people sometimes and say, listen, if you've lived in your home for a really long time and maybe your mortgage is only $200,000, but because you've lived there for 10 years, maybe the value of the home now is $300,000. Whatever the estimated market value is of your home, I actually tell people to include that too. So don't say, well, I have a $200,000 home, I've paid off $100,000, so therefore I'm just going to put $100,000. If the house is worth $300,000, say you have $200,000, because if you sold it, that's what you're going to get, is that $200,000. The reason I say all these things, and that may feel kind of ethereal, but it's not, because the reality is, depending on the situation and what it is you're trying to do, we want to get an accurate description and an accurate full picture of what it is that you have available to you from a resource perspective. So that's really important. So that's why we have that one. And then same thing with small businesses. If you have a small business, you have ownership in it, maybe you gave a loan, or you're an investor, whatever the case is. If you sold that, what is that worth at that point in time? Well, if I invested, I'm invested in a company, I own 60% of the company. If I sold that company today, it would probably go for about $150,000 on the market based off of our revenue. So I would be entitled to 60% of that. So I include that in my assessment of what it is I have available to me, because that is an option that I have. So like I said, and always go conservative with these numbers. With equity, if you are invested in a small business or whatever the case is, I normally say whatever you think you can get market value, go at like 90% of that valuation, just in case you don't get it. So that's what we're doing when we are creating the list. And then the next one is we want to add the most recent market values. That's really important. The most recent market value of alternative assets. Stephen, what the heck is an alternative asset? So this is art, collectibles, jewelry. And listen, I'm not saying that you need to go in and be like, okay, I got these earrings, for $20 at JCPenney. So let's go see what they're, don't bother with that kind of stuff. Okay. I am talking about, do you have a $10,000 wedding ring? Okay. That's something to consider. Do you have heirlooms that were passed on by to you? There's people, what are those little things? The little Russian dolls, it's like they're Russian egg looking dolls, and then they kind of pop out to each other. Huge collectible items, depending on what they are. And everybody knows the Antique Roadshow. You watch something on there. Oh, I found this old, watch down here for, my grandpa gave it to me. How much is that worth? Oh yeah. It's worth a cool $500,000, include the things that are significant. I'm not saying go through and, okay, each of these bracelets was $20. I could probably sell them for like $3 and add it up. Don't do that. But guess what? Pokemon cards, basketball cards, football cards, those are all worth a lot of money. Okay. If you have a collection, figure out, hey, I've got a couple hundred cards here. Some of them are Michael Jordan's and Kobe Bryant rookie cards. Let me look them up. Look up some of the significant ones. I did this during the pandemic. Figured out I had like $10,000 in depending on how the condition was graded, but I had a little over $10,000 in some Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant cards. That was pretty cool. So I'm going to include that in the list. If you have something you're passionate about, you collect, then guess what? Include that, because at the end of the day, like I said, we are trying to get the most accurate picture of what your net worth is, and the things we have are valuable. Now, again, when we say market value, don't go, well, I bought this for $10,000, this fancy art piece. So therefore it probably must be worth, at least 20 now, or I'm seeing it being sold on eBay for $20,000. Well, you're seeing it being sold on eBay, but it hasn't been sold. So I have it's my most individual expensive card that I have. It's worth about $1,200. I bought it for about $1,000. So I made about 20% of it from what I can gather, but I've seen it listed for up to $1,500. I don't go in there and say, well, this card is worth $1,500. I don't know if it's been sold at that. Some places you can find that, what things have actually sold for, some you can't. So like I said, bring it back and make sure that if you can't find a most recent sale, bring it back a little bit and then assume 80 to 90% of the value.
Would you put your life insurance policy in your net worth?
Really good question. I would not.
Okay.
So the life insurance policy is something that happens in case of disasters. It won't do you any good. It'll do your loved ones, some good, so they can account for it then. Now, I know that some life insurances policies have options to where you can take the equity, put it in investments, different things like that. I just personally don't include it because, again, it's insurance at the end of the day. So I would not include that in there. And the reason that we are creating the list, I'm going to get to in a minute, and you'll see why I wouldn't include insurance in there.
It's a false sense of security. If it has a cash value, that's whole life.
It does. True. If it's whole life, it has a cash value tied to it, and you could pull that out. You could include that if you wanted to. I still wouldn't, because the point of insurance is not to get access to it. And the reason I'm creating this list is because these are things that it's like, look, if someone I know is held hostage and they're asking me for $1 million, could I come up with $1 million if I sold everything I had? That's essentially what we're trying to do. Now, sure, in that case, you might get rid of the insurance, but we're going to try not to. So this all ties in with how to calculate your net worth. So at the end of the day, this is a very simple equation. It looks a little complicated the way I wrote it, but at the end of the day, the equation is just assets minus liabilities equals net worth. The problem, and the reason I got a little more specific, is not everybody knows what exactly is an asset and what is a liability. So for those of you watching the short version, if you are not super acquainted with these words, an asset is anything that you can sell that is worth something. A A liability is anything that is costing you money. It is an expense, whatever the case is. Some people will, your children, absolutely a liability. No. All right. So, but the total of your current savings, investment accounts, equity, other assets, a lot of the things that we just mentioned in the list in part 2, that's essentially assets. Just about everything we talked about in part 1 on the other slide, that's going to be credit card balances, loans, all other debts. Take part 1, subtracted by part 2, or I'm sorry, the other way around. Take part 2, subtracted by part 1. That is going to be your net worth. Okay, as close as we can tell. Yeah. Now, look, I put a little caveat on here because I've had people go, Stephen, this is wrong. I have a negative number. To which point I say, well, that's possible. You can have a negative net worth. A perfect example of this. I talk to people about this all the time. I was talking to a guy recently, and he's like, hey, I didn't go to college. I don't have student loans, but I'm just getting started in my career. I don't really have any money. I got $500 in my bank account. That's pretty much it. And I'm just, making ends meet. Well, it's like I told him, I said, that's great. You're doing better than the majority of people that are in college right now. And he's like, what? I said, look, they have a false sense of security when it comes to money. They look at their account and go, yeah, I got $10,000. That $10,000 is a loan from a bank that they gave them for housing and food and their books and all these other things. That's not their money. They have to pay all that back. So just because their bank account says $10,000, they've got a $10,000 bill to go along with it. And that has an interest rate applied to it of 8 to 9%. So they're losing more money every single day that happens. So you, Mr. I didn't go to college. I don't have, student loan debt. Guess what? You're actually doing better than that person because they have a negative $10,000 net worth as of right now. You have a plus $500 net worth. So you are $10,500 richer than them. So 0 is not the worst number that you can come up with when we are calculating net worth. All right. Sure, it's not the number that we want, but unfortunately, there are a lot of people, specifically ones that are going into college, taking on heavy amounts of debt, people who have gone into bankruptcy. Hey, they're just trying to get back to 0. People who are in bankruptcy, they absolutely had a negative net worth. And they're like, look, nothing I can do about this. Better to just, lose it all and start at 0. Sometimes that's actually a great move if it's the lesser of two evils, So again, hopefully that number comes up to a nice big, number in the black. In the finance industry, we don't talk about being in the green so much. We talk about it being in the black. That means you're positive, but whatever. Green, black, whichever one you want to use. We want it to be good. So that is, in short, how you calculate your net worth. Again, you take part 2 that we did here, subtracted by part 1. All right. So coming here. So this is a business term, something called quick assets. And quick assets is important to the person, in my opinion. I wish that we talked about this a little more, because this is basically about how much cash do I have available to me immediately. So this is something that I include in my program. And I make people figure this out because your net worth is great. I've got, you got $400,000 in your retirement account. Well, that's good. You're not supposed to touch that for a long time. I'm, in my 30s, that money that's in there, it's great. But if I touch it before then, I'm going to take a huge penalty. Right. And I don't want to do that. It's going to negatively impact my net worth. So I technically got to leave it there till I'm 60. So that's not really available to me for 30 years unless it's a dire consequence. And I'm going to take a hit on that. So I'd rather not. So when it comes to that, this is where quick assets is important for a couple different reasons. So number one, what is a quick asset? It's exactly this. It's cash, checking, savings account, and retail investment accounts. So retail investment accounts is just your E-Trade, your TD Ameritrade. Hey, I just want to go buy a couple of shares of Apple. That's what that is. I'm not talking about your 401ks, your IRAs. So the actual definition of a quick asset is money that you can have available to you within 24 to 48 hours. That's pretty much it. So you can't get that out of your retirement account that quickly. It takes a couple of days to transfer it. You're going to take the fees. It's like, look, can I just quickly, without penalty, without any issues? Yeah, my house worth $500,000. I got to sell that. That takes a long time to do, a lot of paperwork. I can't get access to that money quickly. look, we just want to know, what are your quick assets? The reason it's important to know this is because when emergencies come along, when really good investment opportunities come along, or at least what we hope are really good investment opportunities come along, when things are bad and we want to pull, cash back, whatever it is, quick assets is the money that we're going to move around. So when we go back and we think about our objectives that we have built out, the 3 to 5 years on the outlook, the quick assets is the money that really we're able to repurpose. Everything else, for the most part, is going to be pretty set. Our retirement account is set. All those things are set. I can't do anything about it. So quick assets, we can move that around. So that's why it's good to have that number in mind to know, hey, what are we starting with? What can we play with? So there you go, quick assets. Okay, so now look at the list and ask these questions. Are my current expenses strategically aligned to my objectives? So when you look at your 1 to 3 objectives that you have, look at all the expense categories and go, well, no, I said I wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. And when I look at my money, I have nothing in my budget that is set for hiking equipment, that is set for physical fitness, to get me in shape to be able to do this. Nothing going toward dietary plans or nutrition or survival. Like, nothing in my budget is currently aligned to that objective to hike the Appalachian Trail. Okay, that's a problem, right? So that's what we're looking at. Oh, I'm trying to pay off all my credit card debt. I'm $20,000 in credit card debt. I want that paid off within 3 years. Okay, well, if I look right now, how much I have a entertainment budget of $800 a month is what I'm doing, and I'm not putting anything else towards the principal of my debt. Is that strategically aligned to my objective? No. So that's where you start to see the disconnect. There's what we want, and then there's what we're actually doing. A lot of times those are not in alignment. Was anything surprising to me about my financial situation? I, unfortunately, have sat across people who have cried when we got to the part where we did the evaluation. A lot of times, especially, and I'll just say what it is, a lot of times it's men that actually end up really breaking down. And it's just an ignorance is bliss thing. And this is why a lot of people don't have a budget. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. We're going to talk about budgets separately. But basically what it just comes down to is people are like, man, I feel like a failure right now. My net worth is not even zero, it's negative. And that can be a really hard pill to swallow, but it's important, because if we don't know what reality is, then we can't do anything about it. So sometimes there's a lot of things that are surprising. Sometimes it's not a big surprise. Sometimes it's a little one. Like, I thought I paid off that couch. This is a real example. I thought I paid off that couch. We got a 0 to 0% APR for 12 months. And I thought we paid off that couch in a year. And now I found out that we're paying 30% APR on it. And we had missed it by $200. We missed one payment. And because of that, they're charging us 30%, and I still haven't paid it off. It's been 2 years. That was a real thing. So sometimes there's little surprises. Hopefully there's nothing but little surprises. Where are my expenses steering my life if left unchanged? Look at the direction of where things are going, and then say to myself, 3 to 5 years, I do nothing. Where am I going to be? Am I going to be in the same place? Am I going to be worse? Am I going to be, slightly better, but I could be doing better or faster? That's something to see. Am I in control of my financial situation? Are you the one that's doing this, or are you just paying the bills as they come in the mail, as they pop up in that email, or as they auto debit out? Are you paying yourself? Are you setting yourself up, for success? Are you in control of it, or are you spiraling? I mean, a great way to know this is just, do you have a general sense of dread every time you have to look at your bank account? Do you have a general sense of despair every single time you think about money? If you do, you're probably not in control, because when you are in control of your money and you know what you're doing and you have a plan, you can be in a bad situation and still feel confident because you're moving in the right direction. Do I have a plan for my life that my money is actively supporting? Are you doing what you want to? And if you are, is your money actively supporting that? Could you be doing more? A lot of times people are doing well. Some people I talk to, they're like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good actually. And then I go, okay, Well, you got all this extra stuff, all this extra money lying around, and you're just kind of piddling with it. You don't have a plan for that money and just throwing it to the wayside. You could be doing better. You guys want to retire by the age of 55. Why not move it up to 50? Oh, well, shoot. I didn't think about that. Yeah. Sometimes it's not about not doing bad. Sometimes it's about doing better faster. A lot of times that's the situation that we can run into. And obviously that's a great case scenario. So now that we have our destination, which is our 1 to 3 objectives that we have, and now that we've created this list, we know all of our assets, we know all of our liabilities, we have our starting point. We know what it is we're starting with. And another thing I'll say about the starting point, I know a lot of this was focused around money, but there's other things. We talk about the 4 types of wealth a lot, and I do specifically. That's social wealth, that's health wealth, financial wealth, obviously, and then time wealth. Well, a lot of times you got to look and take an account for that based off what your objectives are. To use the hiking the Appalachian Trail thing again, health wealth matters. If you are 100 pounds overweight and you've never walked, you haven't walked up, more than a mile in the heat consistently in the past couple months, guess what? Money's not going to be the only thing that helps you reach that goal. You're going to have an accounting for your health, and you're going to have to do that. So again, based off what your objectives are, remember, we're not just talking about money here. You have to look at the rest of your other sources of wealth and make sure that those are all in cohesion with whatever your goals are. All right, so now we're going to move over to budgeting. We are going to talk about money because guess what? Lewis and Clark, the famous explorers that went out, they didn't just wake up one day and go, you know what? We're in great shape. We are just going to head west and start mapping some stuff out. Didn't work that way. They had to find financing. They could not, if you read the story about them, they could not begin. And this is back in the day when it was really easy to live off the land and people readily had those available. It wasn't even completely about food or any of this stuff. They needed a lot of resources and they had to have people fund them to help them go on this journey. Yes. So regardless, it doesn't matter if you are a high school athlete and you're like, listen, I want to play college ball. I want to get, on the track team, and get a scholarship, somewhere running track. Okay, that's great. Guess what? It may not take a lot of money, but so you may be focused on your health. You may be focused, one of your objectives may be getting, 1 second faster on your hurdles, but you still probably need to buy really good shoes. Would probably really help if you had a top-notch trainer that you could pay. Probably could get some additional better equipment, spend a little bit more money on better food and nutrition. So money will always be a part of this journey. So that's why budgeting is so important. So let's get into this. Why do people quit budgets? People hate budgets. We talked about it just a little bit ago about it's barely 1 in 4 Americans have a budget that they are actively following on a monthly basis. Okay. So life happens 1 month and you just don't get back on it. Hey, we were doing our budget great there for a little bit, and then we had this one bad month, AC went out, car broke down, the dog died. We had to pay for a super expensive pet burial because my wife was all emotional about it. And, it just kind of threw us off. We hadn't got back on it. Hear that all the time. Guess what? No budget is perfect every month. It's just as simple as that. And that doesn't matter if it's a personal budget, if it's a budget for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Budgets are guidelines. And guess what? Life doesn't care about your guidelines. Okay. But it doesn't mean you throw out your guidelines when things don't work well. Okay. It's to keep you headed in the right direction. So don't quit on it just because you had a bad month. Takes too much time. Hear that all the time. Guess what? You're doing it wrong. Budgeting should not take you a lot of time. The most time you should spend on a budget is the first time you're making it. That's it. After that, maybe it needs little tweaks here and there. Every month, guess what? You shouldn't look at your budget more than in the beginning. Maybe you look at it once a week. Maybe make sure you're tracking. After the first 2 to 3 months, you shouldn't look at it more than twice a week. Yeah, or I'm sorry, once every 2 weeks. And then even beyond that, once a month, you need 20, 30 minutes. If you're married, sit down with your spouse, 20, 30 minutes, go over it. See how you did. As simple as that. The majority of all of our expenses are automated nowadays. I've got tools at the end I recommend. It shouldn't take long. You want something now, but it's not in the budget. Say you hate budgets and you quit. We see this all the time. I was talking about this, my aunt actually. her budget did not allow for a really comfy chair that she wanted because hers broke. She sat in it all the time. She's like, I love my chair. I don't want to do the budget because I want to save up and get that or whatever. Okay, guess what? She sat in that chair all the time. She loved that chair. It broke. She needed a new chair. Figure out how to squeeze it into the budget. Take away from something else. If you got to do, move things around. Again, we can make adjustments. It's okay. So next one is just, it was a crap budget. A lot of people make budgets. They're just not good. You didn't account for a lot of things. So you started doing it. You're like, this budget isn't working. Budgets don't fail people. You failed budgets. It's as simple as that. So either you built a really bad budget, you made it, maybe the numbers were right, but maybe you made it so unrealistic, in order to meet that, it just wasn't any good. Or maybe it was too, just whatever. It was just kind of, you didn't really pay attention to the numbers and just kind of rounded off and like, it's not helping anything. There's a lot of ways to do a budget wrong. Believing the lie that budgets don't work for people with inconsistent income. Now I get this one a lot, especially because I came from the sales world. I know a lot of entrepreneurs. Stephen, I can't budget because I don't make $6,000 every month. I make $3,000 this month. I make $12,000 the next month. The month after that, I'll make $7,000. I don't really know. So simple, quick fix for that, because I totally understand that, is most people, unless you're just starting out on an entrepreneurial journey, most people know about what they're going to make. Most salespeople have a base salary. So to them, I would say, number one, you need a budget for the most part on living on your base salary if you are a salary plus commission person. If you are 100% commission or you own your own business, then take the sum of 90 days and go, okay, so over this 90-day period, what did I make? And is that roughly what I do the rest of the year? So if the answer is yes, if it's 7,000, 12,000, 5,000, but that's kind of consistent with how the rest of the year goes, then take those 3 months and then do the average. So 7, 5, 12, I'm doing ballpark math here. It's probably around $7,500 as an average. So that's what you build your monthly budget off of. And then you just have to be a little bit more disciplined than the rest, just like you would anyway, and make sure that you have money in your bank account that's coming over from the week over weeks. So can get into that more, but that's, like I said, excuses. Not having fun and hated life. Guess what? Put it in the budget. Budgets aren't meant to make you miserable. Too much fighting with the spouse about it. Okay, well, if you guys are fighting about the budget, then you need to take a step back and go, why are we fighting? What are we fighting about? How can we either, if he or she wants to go out to dinner a little bit more, exactly, yeah, maybe you need to do it. Hey, maybe we're not budgeting for whatever it is. Guess what? This is not an uncommon issue. Again, the budget is not the problem. The problem is you and what you want. Okay, so there needs to be some understanding. If you need to bring a third party in there, go get counseling. Counseling is a great way to kind of figure these things out. At the end of the day, money is just an expression of our heart's desires. Okay, a budget is just the accounting of those desires. That's it. So if it needs it, go get counseling. Your life will be so much better. Last one is, and again, there's other reasons, but these are the main ones. Lose discipline and motivation due to a lack of vision. This is why the objectives are so important. The objectives and the deep meaning that is tied to it. When things get tough, and they will get tough, they always get tough. Even if it's good, even if you're like, man, I'm loaded, I'm rich, I'm worth $1 million, but I'm trying to double my net worth to 2 million in 3 years. Guess what? It's still going to be tough. There's still going to be setbacks. Things are going to happen. Even if that's a great scenario, you're going to lose motivation and discipline because things will happen. Keep the vision. Remember to look up at the peak. We're focused on the steps. We're focused on the journey. Okay. One step at a time, climbing that mountain. But every once in a while, look up. I'm coming after you, Everest. I got you. All right. So this is how people commonly screw up budgets. So first one is a mentality thing. Thinking budget is a restrictive exercise. It is not. People all the time go, and you hear this from the Dave Ramsey people, I'm sorry, but some of the most negative mindsets I've ever heard come from the Dave Ramsey people, because what ends up happening is there's nothing wrong with Dave Ramsey's budget, but the message around it is around finite resources. And the reality is that a budget can also enable you to make money. In my budget, I have money set aside for investing. That makes me money. A lot of people don't talk about that, but in your in your budget, you should have money to invest if you're in a position to invest. Talk about that a lot. Not everybody should, depending on where you're at. But the point is, budgeting can be that. That's something that it can be. Budgeting can be built out for fun. Hey, I'm doing $300 a month to set aside for entertainment purposes. Well, guess what? Last month, I super busy, worked a little bit more than what I thought. We stayed home. We only spent $150 of our entertainment budget. Let's roll it over. So let's do something big this month. We have 300 plus that 150. We got $450. Let's go have fun. Let's do something. So again, it's not a restrictive exercise. Doesn't have to be. Make your mentality about the fact that budgets are great. They don't allocate enough money. This is just common. People don't really do the part 1 and part 2 that we talked about. They ballpark it and say, oh yeah, I think our utilities are about, $100 a month. Yeah, but if you go back and look at the averages, it's actually closer to 175. So then you're about $75 short just on that category. Something people mess up. Forget monthly annual expenses. That's why I put that on the list. You have to have monthly annual expenses. Otherwise, one month, all of a sudden, boom, Amazon Prime hit. Boom, my car tags hit. Boom, this hit. Oh, I forgot about those. And then all of a sudden your budget's busted one month. Nothing budgeted for fun and entertainment. Went over that. Trying to account for every dollar. Now, I know I forgot whose program it is, but there's the every dollar program. The reason it's not a terrible thing to do if you don't have a lot of expenses or a lot of income. But the reality is, as you get on with life, you get a lot more bills, get a lot more expensive, different things like that. The amount of time that it can take to account for every single dollar it's just not worth it. Like, the difference between knowing my monthly expenses are $5,500 versus knowing it's $5,537, that may have taken me an extra 30 to 45 minutes to track that extra $50, and it's like, I'd rather just have that time back. We talk about time wealth a lot in here. I'd rather just do that. It's close enough. If I need to, I'll just round up to $500 or $5,600 to make sure I account for it. So even they do this in the corporate world in accounting. They talk about it all the time. They go, what is material? Accountants, when they're doing an audit on a company, they don't look for every single dime and nickel because it's not worth the resources. So normally you'll see that any expense that's around $50 to $75 for these $1 million companies, accountants don't care about that. They're like, I don't need to see that. It's not material. The amount of time it will take me to figure out whether or not that's accurate is not worth what I'm getting paid to do it. Same thing accounts in our personal lives. Forget budget categories for savings or investments. We talked about that. Poor communication with the spouse. Again, common screw up. Budgets can be a source of contention, but guess what? That's a good thing, because if you're doing a budget and you're trying to take control of your life, but you and your spouse are not in alignment, well, they weren't in alignment before the budget. That's not the budget's fault. That's your fault. You two already weren't on the same page. So when you put the budget together, there's probably already some source of contention or anger or just whatever it was that was going on. The budget just called it out and revealed it. So now you have an opportunity to improve your marriage. It's great. Then the last one is, don't ever adjust the budget when things change. Things change. Look at right now. I filled up the other day and I'm going to have to fill up again next week, and gas is going to be another $3 a gallon or something at the rate things are going. So, hey, depending on how things are in the economy or the world that you live in or the city, I mean, it can be dependent on the city too. Maybe you're living in a place like Miami where things are just insane because so many people are moving there. You might have to adjust your budget a little bit more than you mean to. So remember, budgets enable and empower you, because if you aren't controlling your money, then somebody else is. All right. You think of advertising. The average person sees and hears about 7,000 to 10,000 ads a day. And no, I did not mean to say a week. That is a day. We are the most advertised to people in the history of the world. Okay. These companies are not these large, media or companies and ads and Facebook and social media and news corporations on it. They don't make all their money from ad revenue just because brands like Nike or whoever just think it's fun to do cool commercials. They do it because it works. That is how they get the message out to you that you need to buy their product. And again, there's nothing wrong with buying things, but if you don't have a plan for your money, then you are subject to these very smart, intelligent, in well-funded marketing organizations that are coming out here and using either influencers to tell you what to buy, or commercials, or, little notification hacks, whatever the case is, they will control your money if you don't. All right. Pump all this into your brain. We're going to get through this quick. Budgeting should bring confidence, not guilt. Okay. Simple as that. End pointless FOMO and Saito. I don't know if I just made up Saito as a thing, but it's comparing yourself to others. Okay. That one honestly is a bigger issue than FOMO, in my opinion, right now. Saito is huge. Okay. So treat savings like it's a bill and it's due every damn month. Okay. You have to pay yourself. There should be a category in your budget. Boom. That's the first thing that gets paid. Automatic. I highly recommend to people to automate as many things in their finances as they can. I have it every month. I don't do it. It's not manual. I don't even think about it. I have a savings account. I have a checking account. Every day after my paycheck hits, boom. Certain amount of money goes from checking right into my savings. I don't see it. It just happens. Simple. You can do it with any bank. Be prepared for the worst, because it will happen someday. The worst is going to happen someday. You're going to have emergencies. I promise you. Nobody is untouched by emergencies in this world. So why don't we plan for it well? It's going to happen. So don't be surprised. Okay. So next one, focus on the budget, not your balance. Again, if you're coming and you're starting this and you're in the red, you've got a negative net worth, don't let this be discouraging. Don't focus on the balance. Focus on the fact that, hey, the budget is just part of the plan. That's all it is. I got a plan to make things better. I'm taking control of my life. I am taking back the power in my situation from all the other sources that just had it. I am no longer just a ship on the sea without a rudder. I'm at the helm of my own boat and I am steering it. Okay. So what is it? The master of my destiny, or whatever the saying was from the book. So focus on that. This is another big thing. Your worth is not your net worth. Okay. Really sad story. A couple of years ago about a young kid who was trading irresponsibly and didn't understand exactly what it was that he was seeing. There's the way that the money was reflected showed him being hundreds of thousands of dollars down when it wasn't that bad, but it was still pretty bad. And unfortunately, he went and killed himself right after that. And I'm not saying that is every person that does it, but the reality is a lot of times looking at a number like that can make us feel like we are less. And that is not the case. Your net worth is not your worth. Okay. Everyone has worth. It doesn't matter what the bank account says that it is. All right. We are not addressing that. We are just addressing the fact that we need to be responsible with our money and we need to take charge with our life. So please remember, you have worth regardless of the number that pops up. Guess what? If you're worth $5 million, you're not worth any more than the person that has zero. It's as simple as that. Every single person has worth regardless of what that number that pops up on the net worth is. And then when temptation shows up, say out loud while you were doing this. There's something powerful about speaking, saying things verbally versus just trying to fight it all off in your head. It's amazing sometimes. There's this thing that says speaking your fears. And it's amazing how sometimes if you just say your fear out loud, it can feel silly. You can go, is that really what I was scared of? It's a lot more foreboding in your head when it's just quiet and it's echoing and you got the enemy in there and saying stuff. It's like, no, speak it. Say what your fear is. I am scared of this, but you know what? And then talk out that fear. So do that. Okay. Effective components components of an effective budget. So these are just things that are going to end up in there. Won't stay on this too long, but you can come back and reflect on it. Fixed expenses, they stay the same every month. Flexible expenses, it's like your utility bill. It's going to change depending on, the weather. Total expenses, it's the combined total monthly income, just all the different sources of income that we've talked about. That's all being added up in there. And then disposable income is your total monthly income minus the total expenses, whatever's left over. That's what you have that's disposable. And then that's what we're going to focus on. And please don't take the word disposable as fun money you get to go spend. Okay. That's actually, we should probably rename that category to flexible income or something. The point is that's the money we will take to then go and put towards our objectives to get us there faster. Get the biggest bang for your buck by prioritizing. Some of you know this meme. I think it's hilarious. It's a guy, it's chaos. He's got like, what's going here? This goes here, that goes there. He's freaking out a little bit. And it's just like, listen, if you're like, okay, I have $1,000 left over every month after I pay off all my bills. What do I do with it? I mean, should I do this? Should I do that? It's pretty simple. Okay. At the end of the day, what you do is you start with savings. You pay yourself. You got $1,000 left over. Once you paid off all your bills, do all that other stuff, you got to pay yourself. So savings, that comes first. Now, if you have the recommended 6 to 12 months of monthly expenses saved up, well, now we can skip this category. So we don't need to do savings anymore. So then we move to the next one. High interest loan principals. So anything above 10% APR, I would consider high interest loan. So now if we're fully funded on our emergency fund, we got our 6 to 12 months, then great. Now we're going to start paying off that debt. Let's knock out that debt. Boom, 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 knocking it out. Hey, guess what? Got rid of all my high interest loans. Well, that's awesome. Let's look at some investments. Let's start investing in things. And no, I am not saying that you cannot invest in something while you are still paying off debt. It's not always recommended, very situational. Okay. That's why up here I said, should go. And then I said, but not always. It's a situation by situation thing. Okay. So these are guidelines. They are not hard, fast rules that are set in stone. So then investments. And then the fourth one is just stuff you want. And again, like I said, because this is loose, 10 out of 12 months out of the year, you may follow this order. And then December comes along and dang it, it's Christmas. And I just want to it's been a long year. I want to treat my kids to a cool Christmas. Okay. Go to stuff you want. These are guidelines. If you do this 10 out of 12 months, in 2 of the months you screw it up and you just, whatever, I'm so frustrated. I went out and I did retail therapy and I bought a whole new closet worth of stuff. Whatever, you screwed up 1 month. Does that mean you shouldn't do it well the other months? Exactly. So you're not going to be perfect with this. Few people are. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And then last one with this, some recommended tools. People always ask, I can vouch for all these minus the good budget because I don't do the envelope system. But all of these others I have used at some point in time. Mint.com, my number one favorite. I've probably been using this for a decade. Tool continues to get better, completely free. Okay. Mint.com, I think it's powered by Intuit now. So it's a single sign-on service. You go on there, you can put in all your checking accounts, savings accounts, retirement accounts, student loans, credit cards. It logs into all of them. You cannot pay or do anything. So don't worry if that were to ever get hacked, they don't have access to it. It just helps you see it all. And then it categorizes all your expenses for you. It's a fantastic tool, really helpful, easily my top favorite. The way they make money is recommending certain products to buy or credit cards, and then they get a commission if you sign up for anything. You don't have to do any of that. At the end of the day, like I said, it's free. So that's my number one. The next one is you need a budget. Used that a couple of years ago. It's a good one. If people don't like Mint, YNAB, it's a great one. Excel, good old Excel. You're just one of those people. You're like, look, I just want my Excel spreadsheet. Honestly, I have an Excel and I have my Mint because the reason I like Excel is I like to go in and play. And I like to go, okay, well, if I were to delete all my subscriptions and I turned off my Netflix and I turned off my YouTube TV and I turned off all these things and I got an extra $200 a month from no more subscriptions, what could I do with that? What would happen if I put it here and how fast could I pay that off and different things? So I actually recommend doing a little bit of both. And then the good budget, some people just love cash and envelope systems. Personally, I think it takes too much time. I am not that interested, but I do understand that when it comes to behavior forming, handling cash is the best way to not spend as much money. So it might take enough time. And if that's your situation, you're like, Steven, I swipe the credit card like crazy. I can't be trusted with it. Okay, that's totally fine. Know yourself, know your weaknesses, mature beyond them eventually. But if that's what you need at that point in time, then that's fine. So good budget is a great tool for the envelope system. Highly recommend it. Check it out. So that is it. That is all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed that. Again, if you watch this episode and you're looking at this and you have not done the objectives, go back to, I believe it was session 2 that we have in the financial foundations course, and make sure that you go through and follow the guidelines for the objectives. Because again, none of this matters if you don't have your 3 to 5 year objectives built out and you know where it is you're going.
Good job.
Very good.